Hey Zaka family! Zaka is launching an exclusive membership platform to provide you with career development workshops, coaching, community, and so much more. Go to ZakaConnect.com and sign up to receive information on how to access early registration and perks. Hello, everybody. This is Paul Herman, the Prince of Motivation and host of Zaka Presents My Journey. We're creating this vulnerable and positive platform where you can get inspired and motivated from different leaders from our community. Today, our guest is Sharif Abou Sabh, who is Senior Vice President at HNTB Corporation. Sharif, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Paul.
Yes. Well, thank you in advance because I'm looking forward to diving in and hearing all about this journey, young man. I know there's a lot of great things that you're going to be sharing with our listeners today. But before we get into where you are currently right now, if you could do us a big favor and just kind of let the listeners know a little bit more about your cultural background and the journey moving to America.
Sure. So I was born in Egypt, Cairo, Egypt, in 1954, and Egypt is a pretty old country. It goes back a good 6,000 years, so it's a very interesting. Cairo is a very interesting place to grow up because of its history, if you will, which is pretty evident everywhere you go. I was born into my father was a general in the Egyptian military, and my mother was the best mother in the world.
Oh, good shout to mom.
And then, at the age of 6, if you will, or 7, something like that, my father was appointed as a diplomat to West Germany, where we spent a good 6 years. So this is where I picked up the German language, if you will. And it was a very nice 6 years, traveled all over Europe, got to many countries in Europe. As you know, in Europe, countries are not too far away from each other, so you can actually drive, to France, Spain, Holland, etc., Italy, and so on and so forth. So got quite a bit of a rounded education from different cultures around the world, including obviously my own culture, the Egyptian culture. So it was a very good upbringing, if you will, as far as a rounded experience and a rounded education. Many languages learned during that time. So it was a very pleasant upbringing, if you will.
Now, talk a little bit more about just your childhood in a sense. What do you remember the most about growing up in Egypt? I mean, Egypt's a beautiful place. I haven't been there, directly, but I've seen a lot of great things. What is that like lifestyle?
Yes. So I grew up in a pretty comfortable lifestyle, if you will. Let me just give you a very quick my description of Egypt, if you will. And if you live in Cairo, actually, it's essentially comprised of 3 cities. Let me call them cities. The Pharaonic, which goes back to 6,000 years, and that's where the pyramids are, and the temples, and all the antiquities, and the tombs of King Tut, Hatshepsut, etc., etc. And that's the pharaoh city, if you will, or the ancient, super ancient Egyptian city. And then you have the second city is essentially the Islamic empire that that settled in Egypt, or uh, uh, and all is architecture and mosques and narrow streets and the merchants and all of that, which creates a pretty interesting and quaint atmosphere and environment. And then the third one, which is the new city of Cairo, which is no different than New York City, by the way. High rises and, residential buildings and this, that, and the other, and athletic clubs and so on and so forth. So that's a very quick description, if you will, of Cairo. Alexandria, for instance, is also a very ancient city that was founded by Alexander the Great when he went to Egypt. Also beautiful. And believe it or not, it used to be the playground of the so-called rich and famous before, Monte Carlo and Nice and all those now stomping grounds for the rich and famous. Alexandria used to be that. In fact, I think in 1933, Alexandria was given, if you will, the an award of the most beautiful city in the world. So
Okay.
this gives you an idea about,
There's this growing up in that area and seeing it happening, firsthand, and having people coming by and enjoying the lifestyle.
Yes, pretty Paul, pretty rich culture to grow up in.
I mean, it has a lot of history,
Yes.
so I think that truly does help out any country. When you have a lot of great history, you have great leaders and you have civilizations and a lot of great things have come from there. So I think that it does help a lot. Obviously, I could assume it definitely helps with like tourism. When
yes,
people are coming in there from all over the world to kind of enjoy that moment. Now, I know you talked a little bit about your father. You mentioned that he was in the army, right? And I know that he was very influential person. But did you ever think about joining the army yourself? And what attracted you to like engineering?
Actually, it was the influence, if you will, of an uncle of mine who was also an engineer, and I've always admired this particular uncle, and I just wanted to grow up and to be like him. So that was the impetus, if you will, in addition to my father and my mother, both encouraging me to join the engineering school in the university.
And in Egypt or in America?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Just making sure.
Yeah, my first bachelor's degree, which is a 5-year degree, was in Cairo, the university, and it's a pretty old university. Actually, it goes back like a good 400 or 500 years or something like that. So pretty well established, if you will, colleges and curriculum and good education, if you will. So that was the motivation, if you will, to go to engineering school and be an engineer. As far as military is concerned, believe it or not, my father did not want me to go to the military. So he did everything possible to keep me out of the military.
And based off of his experience, or just like he just knew that you were, destined for that?
I think he wanted his son to have the higher education, go and do a master's degree and a bachelor's, and a PhD, et cetera, et cetera. So he preferred the academia as opposed to the military. And that was his, I suppose, his rationale.
Okay. Well, I mean, hey, look, it worked out.
Yeah.
It worked out, Why did you move to America? And what was like your dream when you moved there? I know, like, obviously coming from a different country, a lot of people are like, oh, America, the land of free. There's a lot of great opportunity. Like, what were you expecting?
So don't forget that I got exposed to the Western civilization by living in Germany for a good.
True, yeah. And
So
what part of Germany again?
it was a city called Cologne.
Okay.
In German, they pronounce it Köln. Back then, by the way, it was West Germany and East Germany because that was in the 60s. So, the reason I came, I came to the United States, by the way, in 1977 as an intern for an engineering company for 3 months during the summer, and I just fell in love with New York, and applied to Columbia University the following year, which was my last year in college, and got accepted in Columbia and came here to Columbia University to do a master's in structural engineering, and worked out very well. And for some reason, my professors asked me, said, "Hey, Sharif, you want a green card?" I said, "What's a green card?"
Oh, wow. You're like, "Wait, I'm just trying to go to school."
Yeah. I mean, I came here to do a, postgraduate work and go back to my country. And so he applied for me, and I think within a week I got a green card.
Oh, wow.
And I got an offer from an engineering company. I did have a cousin who actually owned an architectural firm here in New York City that introduced me to this engineering firm, which is called Ammon and Whitney. It's the premier engineering firm for design of suspension bridges, and you may want to. Actually, the Verrazano Bridge was one of the projects, the Kosciuszko Bridge, and all over the country they had suspension bridges and a lot of fancy, if you will, roofs in JFK Airport. Call it pre-stressed post-tension roofs or cables. And so that's where I started, and I spent a couple of years there, learned a lot, and at the same time, actually, while I was there, I went to the New York University Business School at night. So earned an MBA, and continued to work there until an opportunity came to join a Saudi Arabian engineer as a partner to set up an engineering company here in the United States to design primarily hospitals and major office buildings in Saudi Arabia. So we were stationed here in New York. We grew from 2 engineers to 30 engineers, and that went on for a good 3-4 years. And then the oil glut happened. So the financing or the funding, if you will, of those major projects stopped. So we went out of business. And that is when I applied and joined the engineering department of the New York City Transit Authority. And that was my induction, if you will, into the field of transportation and urban transit and railroads and highways and so on and so forth.
That's a big thing right there. I mean, sometimes we take for granted like transportation, like all the highways and buses and terminals and things like that. But there's a lot of thought that goes in behind that to making sure that it flows. Like sometimes I even think about it when I'm at the airport, like just knowing the distance between a terminal. So I'm complaining myself, like trying to run from one place to the next. But there's a reason for that, in order to make sure that the planes are safe. That there's a lot of things that you guys do, put into those thought process.
You can imagine, Paul, the importance of transportation. Like, for instance, if you live in New York, just imagine this. The New York City subway stops. Exactly my point. The the city will stop, the financial district will stop, the economy will stop. And not only that it affects just locally the New York City, but New York City being New York City, controlling a lot of the commerce and economics of the world, it will affect it. So my point, I suppose, is that a system like the New York City subway or the highways around and the bridges and the infrastructure of that area of New York City is vital to life in all its forms, not just across the United States, but across a lot of places in the world.
Now you're right about that, and I know that obviously, over the many years, you've had a successful career. You manage over $1 billion of like projects. Like, what do you think is the secret source to your success? Like, a lot of people say, is it this, is it that? But like, well, I'm talking to you now and trying to figure it out. Like, what's the secret sauce now?
I think not to be afraid of making mistakes. That is
okay. I'm with you on that.
Having the courage to make decisions, and not not being afraid of making the same mistakes are a good thing, believe it or not, because that's where we learn things and correct ourselves and our path. Working hard, learning, going to school at night, accumulating, not for the sake of accumulating, but learning and doing postgraduate work, both in engineering, in all aspects. I have an affinity, for instance, for literature, so I read a lot of books and literature that has nothing to do with engineering, and the intent is to further my education in other fields, if you will. So that's the simple, if you will, secret sauce. The other thing is not to be a leader of teams that are 350 engineers or 400 engineers at any one of those projects. You have to be a kind person. You have to be encouraging. You have to protect your team members. You have to allow them to make mistakes and learn from it, and be almost like I wouldn't say father figure, but a big brother figure that cares for them and promotes them, and at the same time be tough.
Yeah. Yeah, you got it, especially when you're a leader. Like, you gotta have that type of relationship, especially when you're managing that many people.
Yes.
You have to wear different hats. You have to know how to talk to different individuals. Not everybody wants to be relay the information the same way to everybody. You have to kind of like split that. Yeah. And a question I was thinking as you were talking about it and before, I just want to know, like, why are you so passionate about engineering and transportation? Like, what is the big drive for that?
I'll tell you. Yeah, that's a good question, Paul. So I believe I know that what I do affects the quality of people's life.
I see. It's a direct correlation to somebody,
yes,
a larger community. Yeah, I get you.
That gives me satisfaction, pleasure, and just to give you an example, I was the leader or program manager for a $7.3 billion highway project for the Illinois Tollway, just outside Chicago. And we widened existing highways by an additional lane of 293 miles, replaced 58 bridges. One of those bridges was 1.5 miles long. So when you do projects like that, you relieve the congestion on highways. What does that mean?
Yeah.
That means that people are going to get home faster and save 20, 30 minutes of their day to spend with their family, which connotes to me that they are having quality time better than sitting in a car and in a parking lot, if you will. So that is adding to the quality of people's life.
That's well said. I think that you found a passion for something, but you also found purpose in it. Like there's a significant purpose in me being here. Me putting in the work and the time. Obviously, you had to do a lot of schooling and a lot of practice to make it. To get to the place where you are. There's a lot of things you have to do to climb this ladder, but that the work that you do directly affects. Like speaking to like a doctor. They're like,
yes.
I go to work every day knowing that I'm prescribing something to help somebody get better,
yes.
a physical therapist. Now, you talked about, some of these big projects. You talked about, was $7 million, you said, was the last one? The Chicago Transit?
Yeah, billion with a B.
Oh, billion. Okay. We're talking big money right here. Yeah. Billions and billions of dollars. You worked on so many big projects. And you talked about JFK. You talked about Chicago Transit Authority. Yeah. Like, what was the most proud moment? Like the one you could look at and be like, this project right here was the one that
I gotta tell you,
had to tip your hat off for.
I gotta tell you, Paul, every single one of them I was proud of.
Because to see it at the end, it's got to be beautiful. You're like, sometimes I'm assuming you're probably going like a helicopter to probably see it, or even driving.
Actually, used to do that. Yes,
I could only imagine. I'm not an engineer, but I would do that.
yeah, we did that several times before and after the project completed.
That's right. That's got to be beautiful to know that like you're looking at an empty place, or you're looking at a highway that's congested, and you're like, yeah, give me a month or two, I got this covered. Right. Yeah. And then you get the team together and you start building things out. And before you know it, it's the finished product.
Yeah. And then, actually, the last project, Paul, that I worked on in California for 5 years was the extension of the Bay Area Rapid Transit, which is the San Francisco subway, from San Francisco to Silicon Valley, which was a 16-mile extension of the subway system. 11 miles were at grade, and 5.5 miles were under the city of San Jose in a tunnel that had a diameter of 55 feet and 100 feet below ground. So you can imagine 55 feet, that's like a building that is 5 stories high under the ground that you tunnel through with a tunnel boring machine 100 feet below the city of San Jose. That was a $9.1 billion project that is very proud of.
Wow, you're dealing with some big money right there. That's a little nerve-wracking, right? I just out of thinking about that, like what's been the toughest challenge you faced, in the beginning of your career, and how did you overcome it? Like you got to this point in time, but obviously there was you said you had to learn, you have to, there's mistakes along the way. Like what was one of the toughest challenges you faced?
The toughest challenges is when you deal with projects like this, big projects like that. You have obviously contractors that are building those projects for you. The toughest challenge was to actually build enough trust with them so they trust you, you trust them, and the relationship does not have antagonism or it's a collaborative effort. And it takes time for people to trust you, and they see you, they watch you. Mm-hmm. Are you a tough guy? Are you a tough and fair guy? Fairness is the name of the game when you're conducting projects of this nature. And once they perceive you as fair, they'll give you the shirts off their back.
You're talking about the workers, everybody.
Yes, we're talking about the workers, the actual contractors, the 300,000. Like the projects that I did in Illinois was 320,000 laborers working on this project. So, it's big stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, that's a massive team.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you got to oversee all of that. Like, oof, oof.
Yeah, but obviously you have a team. You have your tentacles through your team all over.
True. Yeah.
Yeah.
You gotta have a team within a team.
Yeah, and the success of those projects goes to the team, not to me. That's how I treat it.
Well said. I know sometimes people don't even acknowledge the people that helped them out. They're always like, yeah, I did this and I did that. But, your staff members that are listening right now, like they just got a shout out without even knowing. So thank you for even acknowledging those people and acknowledging the people that you probably never even met, but you know that they worked on that project. So I appreciate you, and I know they do as well too, for saying that.
All about collaboration and partnerships. That's what it's all about.
Now, through your experience, this is something that I want to kind of just bring up. Is like, have you ever felt like you had to deal with like some type of discrimination, in your careers, like climbing up the ladder, and how did you like manage that?
I did not, Paul. I never felt that. I never encountered it. But then again, I have to tell you, I mean, I'm a very straightforward and sometimes accused of being overly aggressive. So you don't mess with Sharif. So.
Hey, look, I'm catching the vibe right now. I'm catching the vibe. Hey, look, if they did mess with you, right? Just think about that. That's 300 and some thousand people you got on deck.
Yeah,
like, look, you don't want to do that. So,
no, you don't. Yeah,
okay,
and
wow.
there are, if something like that were to happen, there are avenues, and and remedies for things like that via the EEOC, for instance, Equal Opportunity Office. There are many, if you will, avenues, legal and otherwise, that you could resort to, and you will get rectified the situation.
Okay, I get you on that. Now, what is like one of the first lessons you learned, like working in corporate structure? That school didn't prepare you for. I know a lot of times some of the guests have got on the show and talked about that and said, like, I went to school for this, but it didn't really prepare me for this. Like, so what is that, and how did you deal with that?
I think the most important thing in working in corporate America is listening. Listening is 90% of the solution. Be last to talk in a meeting. Be last to make a comment. Listen, digest, think, and then talk. That is the most important lesson that anyone I would advise to use. Listening is a very important characteristic, function of anybody's demeanor and perception by others. When somebody says that this guy is a good listener, that means he's a good thinker, that he's thoughtful. And that is the one thing that I would advise everybody: be last to talk.
That was deep. Be last to talk.
Yeah.
It's and that is a lot of times, like I think about it now, like even like the president when he has to give that speech, he's not just hopping on a microphone to be like, okay guys, here we go. He has a lot of thought process going on, to make that decision, and it's because not just because the country is dependent on him, but he knows that what he says, people are going to listen. He wants to make sure that that it's done. It's well thought out, top to bottom, goods and bad. So I think anyone that's listening who's in the top or looking to be in a top executive position, like knowing that listening is a skill in corporate America.
And the other thing, Paul, actually, that's very important also as a leader, in order to uh, evoke conversations, think tanks, thinking of people to participate in the discussion, is asking open-ended questions.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually a book. It's called Leadership by Asking Questions. And that I found to be a very effective tool, is to just ask an open-ended question and sit back and listen. You have no idea how much thought, very good thoughts, come out of those conversations and meetings. One more thing, don't make a meeting more than 45 minutes. Otherwise, it's an absolute waste of time.
You really think so? I mean, I know people's patience and they're like, oh, gotta go. But I'm assuming these projects that you're working on, we're talking about billions and billions of dollars. Like the meetings were 45 minutes.
Oh no! I'm talking about management meetings.
I was like, hold on now, that's $1 billion. I was like, y'all got to be that good.
No,
Y'all got to be 45 minutes, guys. Here we go. We're gonna figure it out right now.
Yeah, they're different than workshops. I mean, workshops could take a day or two.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's yeah.
Okay. Now, how did you deal with like the politics of program management?
The most important thing is to create an environment of collaboration, fairness, and trust. That once that actually gets into motion, into a team with your client, with your contractors, it reduces the fog of politics, if you will, the unnecessary political posturing, etc. So it's really the building of the team and the environment that encourages collaboration.
Mm-hmm. I know you do a lot of that where you're at right now. I know you're currently the senior VP at HNTB Corporation, right? And could you tell us a little bit more about what you do over there?
Program competing and winning mega programs such as the ones that I shared with you, the Chicago Transit Authority, that was a $2.9 billion project, the Illinois Tollway, $7.3 billion, the San Jose, the BART extension, Silicon Valley, $9.1 billion. So competing, winning, and delivering projects of this nature in around the country, essentially, and they're all transportation oriented type of projects, and that's basically what I do.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And people, how does work come to you? That's the question I want to ask. Like, we're talking about billions of dollars. How does that come to you in an email? And how does that? Hey guys, I want to work with you directly.
No. Actually, it is a competition. The client, let's say an agency, the Chicago Transit Authority, puts out a request for proposal, and in it they describe what they want you to do. They describe their aspirations and expectations and goals, and you respond to that request for proposal. We call it RFP. And you go and do a presentation. So, several companies would go to compete against each other. You go do a presentation to the client, and they score your presentation, score your written proposal, and decide who won the job. And they inform you that you won the job. And then when you go and start, and the rest is essentially building the collaboration and the momentum, the urgency, the competitive aspect and you deliver the project.
Mm-hmm.
Which I could talk to you about it for like 16 hours. So that's the steps, if you will, of how you win projects, you
Okay.
deliver projects. Yeah.
Now, how does like the how do you think of like when you when you think about the industry, like how do you feel like it has evolved, over the many years? And like
Well,
what do you
yeah.
think about it now?
Well, I mean, our industry is pretty solid. Don't forget, I mean, meaning here in the United States, were the first ever to put a highway system like the one that we have across the entire country that is vital for the economics of the country, by transporting goods from one place to the other and so on and so forth. The commercial railroads like CSX and BSNF and so on and so forth. These guys, they carry merchandise and across hundreds of thousands of miles between cities and states and so on and so forth. The, we did actually regress a little bit as far as the investment in our infrastructure. And now, the President of the United States has just passed a huge injection of funding into the infrastructure of the United States. So you'll see the effect of this huge investment in about 5 to 6 years when, projects are started and completed and so on and so forth. And they're all directed to highways, railroads, technology, actually, and what communications and so on and so forth.
Now, what
yeah,
what I was going to say, actually, what advice would you give to like a young individual, upcoming in engineering, right? Who's looking to follow somewhere in your path, right? After hearing this interview, like, what words of advice would you give?
Several things, actually. One is continue to further your education. Be aggressive about furthering your education. Don't stop at your bachelor's. Keep going. When you join corporate America, most important thing is listen to others and be the last to speak. Do not be afraid of making mistakes. Mistakes are good. Well, obviously, we try not to deliberately make mistakes, but if you make a mistake, don't regret it. Keep going, learn from it, and just the sky is the limit. Reach for the sky, the stars and the moon and the sun.
Mm-hmm. Something that you have stated just in that last thing was just to further in the education. Several of our guests, have been on the show, really focus on that aspect. Saying that education is like the key to a lot of their growth. And you've definitely have done that in your career, and I think that it shows. And a lot of the guests that have come on before have done that. Now, my last question to you is like, you've been on quite a journey. Just listening to it and reading about it. When you sit down and reminisce about your career, what is something that if you were to tell the old you, what would it be?
I think, being an engineer, I have an affinity to architecture, actually, and somehow, actually, a lot of people accuse me of being, having an architectural knack, if you will. But, I'm happy where I am. I'm satisfied, and, I'm good with that. The one thing, actually, that I'm very proud of, my two sons, One of them actually won 2 Emmys 2 years in a row.
Oh, wow.
And they're both similar to myself. Um, hard charging, fair, aggressive, aggressive in a good way, not in a bad way. Guys that are pretty successful
Mm-hmm.
in life.
Did you ever think that you would be where you are currently today? If someone was to come to you back then and say, "Hey, look, just to let you know, you're going to be working with billions and billions of dollars, working across the country, doing several different projects," would you believe that you would be where you are today?
No, 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 I would no. It's just a progression of what I did as far as my career is concerned, and I always wanted to reach for bigger projects and bigger things, and I was not afraid of making mistakes, and somehow it worked, Paul.
Mm-hmm. Well, Sharif, I mean, wow, my hat goes off to you, young man. The
Thank you.
amount of things that you do. First off, just helping. Like you said, you go to work every single day knowing that there's purpose right there. I've been on some of those highways, right? I've been in some of those airports or whatever the things that you've worked on. I've
Mhm.
touched in some capacity, in some way, and a lot of the listeners have as well too. Right. So I appreciate the work that you're doing with you, your team. You talked a lot about, just how your upbringing and, where it's taking you. You definitely focus on the whole thing about education. I love that you really touch base on like being kind. A lot of times people, bypass the simple things in life. Just be kind,
Yeah.
being fair, being kind, the listening first, and then speaking. Those things were very big gems, that you were dropping in our interview today. That I greatly appreciate you sharing those things, and it's again sharing your journey and just being very vulnerable. I greatly appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Greg.
Mm-mm. And to the listeners, if you want to hear more inspirational stories like Sharif, please check us out on ZakaConnect.com. Follow our social at Zaka Connect and follow our feed, Zaka, wherever you listen to your podcast.